My name is Corina Hierro, and I'm a global startup scout here at Techstars. And welcome to today's digital event. This is must-haves of an investable team because, as we know, when it's time to grow, finding the right people and building the right team quickly becomes one of your top priorities as a founder. And joining us today is Vijay Tirathrai, Managing Director of the Riyadh Techstars Accelerator. Vijay, go ahead and introduce yourself, a little bit about your program, and we can go ahead and kick it off.
Corina, thank you so much. Thank you for setting this call up. A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, depending where you are. I'm currently based in the Middle East. I'm speaking from Dubai today, and it's a pleasure to join you on this call. My role at Techstars is the Managing Director of the Techstars Riyadh program, as well as the regional head for the Middle East and North Africa region. I've been with Techstars for 7 years. And before I turned to a full-time investor at Techstars, I've been an entrepreneur for 35 years, building 7 different businesses across different parts of the world. I enjoy what I do today is because I love discovering, brilliant teams, investing in them, investing in the ideas, which we're going to be talking about today. So I hope to bring my experience, my knowledge in investing to help the audience think about how they can best pitch to investors as well as apply to Techstars in the process. Thank you. So I'm going to be presenting to you some really fundamental, basic level of what investors and in particular Techstars look for. A lot of this stuff may sound very familiar, but I like to nuance around the conversation around teams and how do you build great teams, which I would prefer if you have questions coming from the audience, and Corina help us moderate that along the way. I'll try to keep the presentations as brief as I possibly can. So I think what I want to talk about is really criteria for success and the 4 key influences that drives us in terms of selecting companies at Techstars. So Peter Thiel, which most of you know, is one of the key influences in the investment field. Early invested in Meta or Facebook, PayPal, and so on. He famously quote that often investors will make up their mind in the first 5 minutes, but what drive those decisions in the first 5 minutes? There has to be some criteria in the minds of the investors that basically size the prospect up very quickly. And so in summary, I think you can, you kind of know that, the team, the market, traction, and the idea, it's pretty much what investors look for. But at Techstars and many other places, particularly for early stage pre-seed companies, the team is being over-indexed at almost 3 times in the mix of other criteria. The team is crucial because at early stage, you really don't have a lot of financials. You don't have maybe revenue. It might be pre-revenue, pre-customer. And so the quality of the team is really make or break that decision. And so when you think about the team, and I'll try to keep it very brief here, is how much individuals have accomplished, the ability to demonstrate persistence in pursuing a problem, the ability to learn and unlearn quickly, demonstrating integrity, and why are these people as a team the best people to solve this problem that's being presented, coachability and feedback and openness. These are just some of the very key essence that investors, and myself included, spend a lot of time talking to founders to really understand them as a team. I just want to quickly talk about market, the size of the market right now. It's how big it is. You think about TAM, SAM, and SOM, and what's the specific angle that you're trying to address, the niche that you're trying to address in the marketplace. And of course, traction, you probably would have guessed, is going to be customers, revenue, But because we deal with a lot of companies at pre-revenue, pre-customers, traction can be defined as perhaps signups, prototypes, some survey response you might have in the marketplace. All this is qualifiable as traction. So you don't really need to have evidence of customers as yet if you are at very early stage of launching a company. And then finally, at the bottom of the rank is the idea. Now, this might surprise some. I think that the ideas that I've seen at thousands of pitch decks. I would agree that there's some really creative solutions out there to solve the problems, but the underpinning issues or strategy that these founders are trying to do are not necessarily new. And we know that from experience of a company going through a Techstars 12 weeks program, that these ideas get often pivot to several iterations before they actually mature and settle down in some direction. So we don't think the idea is really the top of the priority. It's going to be the quality of team. There's a saying that you can change the horse, but you can't change the jockey, because we're investing in the jockey. That's a team that actually rides the horse, and that's why it's so important to us. I just want to go through 4 key points that I think is really interesting from my perspective as a managing director who's making a decision to invest in these companies. What drives me and what influences me? Firstly, I'll ask the question, why you? Why you versus the other founders that are pitching? Why are you the best person, or the 2 co-founders, the 3 co-founders, the best individuals to solve this problem? I really need to understand that. The second is that often we're not investing, while we think we're investing in technology companies, i.e., by definition, they have a solution to something, but I'm more interested in the problem that you're trying to solve rather than the solution. In other words, what exactly that you have an innate idea, an obsession about the problem, some insights that perhaps no one else have those insights that makes you so unique to be in the driver's seat to build this company. And that area of how you're solving the problem, your insights to the problem, is really more interesting than the solution in itself. Thirdly, about the market size. Often when you get into a new innovation area, it's really hard to put a number around the market size. And what we advise people is to say, look at comparables or parallels in different existing markets, and pick a niche that you think you can get early and quick traction or adoption in the marketplace before you tackle the large marketplace. So the market size is sometimes often difficult to quantify, but at the same time, investors want to know there is exponential growth potential if the market is massive. So if it's too niche, on the other hand, it's limiting. But if it's large enough for investors to come beyond Techstars as follow-on investors at Series C, Series A and B, then we know this can really scale massively. And last but not least is the timing. I've invested in companies that arguably were too early in this cycle, and it just took a lot of time to be able to get traction. And then sometimes you look at companies that are pitching you today, been there, done that. You've seen that solution 5 years earlier, 6 years earlier. It's way too late to invest in these areas. So timing too is really interesting. So those are the 4 key influences that will drive me as the investors to make that decision whether to invest in those teams or not. I'm going to stop here, Corina, because I really enjoy if we can have more Q&A. I've got more slides to share if necessary, but we can pause here. But that's really at a high level how decisions are made when you evaluate the prospect for investing into companies or not.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that information, Vijay. So let's kick it off with the, what does an investable team look like, right? So during the early stages, can you tell us and talk through what founders look for or should look for in those early stage hires, or those very first hires that are so important in a team?
Totally. And I think, the the founding team is really the bedrock of the company. And so if you don't have a founding team, or there are gaps, and there'll likely be gaps, let's be honest, you rarely find a perfect team, but you could say that, this team is stronger than the other by comparisons. And so we're trying to get to that, where you can say that this team is stronger than the others. But typically, when at Techstars, we have certain preferences or biases that we're actually investing, because it's a tech company. We want to make sure there's a strong CTO, so someone with a strong technology background that understands engineering and building a product, and that by default is a preference. The second is someone who has the ability to, has proven the ability to execute and have persistence in the marketplace. What I mean by that is that this could be the first company they're building, but perhaps they've taken on projects in the past, maybe during days in their college, or they could be working for a large multinational, and they've initiated projects within their careers that has demonstrated the entrepreneurial skills to be able to take an ideation to execution and be successful at that. And so, this might sound a little ambiguous, but really we're trying to find about those individuals who have that unique ability to see through a project, to see through an idea to the finishing line. Now, the flip side of that is, of course, individuals who have been quite accomplished in building, maybe this is the second, maybe the third company. And so they have an entrepreneurial experience, and therefore we call them serial entrepreneurs. That's an easy one to often default in saying, hey, that they have credentials. But often you find that the vast majority of people applying to Techstars are first-time entrepreneurs building the first company, and they may not have the benefit of showcasing we've built a company before, we've exited. So what do we look for? And those reasons I mentioned, or those examples I mentioned, where you can see traction evidence in the other projects in the past, will be really helpful. If I can extend, Corina, I think your question might be implied that if I'm a solo founder, and would I be an investable team? I want to say that it's rare to find solo founders being invested. I will probably throw a number out there saying 1 in 10 would be solo founders, and they're really good in what they do. They're able to multi-skill. They can build tech. They're great salespeople, but we don't see that as a common characteristics within our portfolio. What we tend to see is that there's typically 2 co-founders, maybe 3 co-founders. One is very strong in technology, and the other is very strong in business development, and so on and so forth. The importance of having, I think, 2 or more is simply bandwidth. Bandwidth is simply defined by the capability to execute multiple tasks simultaneously in a short space of time. So if you have a band of 2 or band of 3, you can accomplish so much more than a band of 1, quite simply that way. And so I think having a co-founder is often very helpful in that context.
And there's a question related to this on the Q&A. So Vijay asked, for the team aspect specifically, how much is indexed on single founders versus a 2 or 3 person founding team? If we get accepted into Techstars, are we expected to find a co-founder?
Yes, so I want to be abundantly clear. We're not against solo founders, and I think this is maybe a misconception. We do welcome solo founders. But having said that, there's of course advantages when you have more than 1 founder. So having 2 or 3, as I said, you have more bandwidth to process information. Now, in the context of going through a Techstars Accelerator program, it's pretty clear that you're going to go through 12 weeks of intense mentoring, learning, exposure to corporates and opportunities, and the ability to follow up or follow through with those leads, with those connections, is really near impossible for one person to cope. And so having 2 or 3 on the team to be able to work as a team, to be able to take advantage of those resources coming to you, will be phenomenal. So, so when you are thinking about applying to a program, and you know that you are most likely to get a co-founder, but haven't found a co-founder yet, my advice would be work hard in finding that co-founder as much as you can. So help have mentors to help you identify those co-founders as early as possible before you join the program, as opposed to after you join the program. Because of that ability to process information quickly, but also, you know, when you have a buddy that you can talk to, and you have a buddy that you can share really intimate details, it's really advantageous to be able to have that co-working relationship, sharing that journey.
And Vijay, so as we most of us know, you know, very early on, when you're building a company, your resources might be scarce; they're limited. So, what should founders look to build out, or how should they look out to build a candidate pipeline when they might not have all of the resources necessary?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think it's really hard one to answer because, you know, when you co-opting a co-founder is different from hiring your first employee, or perhaps you know, a DevOps engineer or a sales assistant to do biz dev. Because a co-founder is more than just a hire. It is really the bedrock of the company, and so the investors are looking from the lens that I'm investing because of these 2 individuals or 3 individuals. So the idea of taking a short-term view of hiring someone, if it doesn't work, I'm going to fire someone and then hire someone back again. It doesn't quite work, right? So you really have to get that decision or that match perfect almost from the get-go. And so building that pipeline, as you said, is crucial. And you can do that in so many ways because, number one, participate in communities where you have like-minded individuals, entrepreneurs, building companies. So think about tech hubs. Station F, for example, in Paris is a great example. You know, just hanging out down there. We work in different cities around the world, have a lot of tech companies operating, attending events, pitch nights. You'll be surprised to know that many of the companies building themselves are also struggling to look for co-founders. And it's no harm to basically, you know, sit down, if the chemistry is right, find a way to kind of augment your business to accommodate the co-founders sometimes. Because more than the idea, the founding team is really what people will be investing in, as opposed to the idea per se. And therefore, really making a lot of effort in building a candidate pipeline through engaging with people in the community, events, posting on LinkedIn, social media, to get your awareness out on what your vision is, will be super helpful to be able to draw people into your story. Talking about story, just maybe finishing this off, I think if you're the visionary, often there are great people who are great executors and with great skill sets, but they not be the visionary of the company. But if you are the visionary of the company, then you really have to get your story being told. How do you exude that energy, positivity, why you're obsessed about solving this problem? That's going to draw people. And that's something you want to keep in mind.
Yeah, because that was going to be a follow-up question, is actually if you could share tips on how to get candidates interested in your startup, or in, you know, if your brand isn't large, like when you are going out to these community events, to the startup events, how do you get them excited about your idea, you know, when you're just starting off?
So I think let's separate the two. Good question, but let's separate into two buckets. So individuals who have had track record, as in this is a second company, or for example, they made some success in the corporate world, as an example, will have a bit of an advantage in getting some presence out there in the market, because they're a known quantity, they're a known entity in an individual sense. However, and so talking about the story of what they intend to build, what they're solving, they might have an easier chance. The second bucket of people may not have that privilege of having any of those backgrounds. So basically, they are, a non-quantifiable entity. So they're coming in from as green shoots, and no one really knows them. That's a lot harder. And I think what those individuals might want to think about is, how do you go about basically talking about a narrative, not a brand, about how you're passionate about solving, say it could be a payments issue, could be climate change. You want to be seen to be an advocate of some challenges out there to solve, the world's problem. And if you get some attention around what you're trying to solve, people are going to buy into that vision, and you're more likely to attract someone to you. So that is one aspect. The second aspect is, of course, as I referenced earlier, your networking and building relationships is crucial to be able to draw a lot of interesting candidates, because ultimately is that shared vision, shared values, and the chemistry of two people or three people getting together works. I've found that in my analysis, when I look at and ask questions at interviews, I say, how did you guys meet? There is a large percentage of them met through, whilst they were either in college together, they were in school together, they grew up together, or they were colleagues together. The vast majority of them. Very rare you find someone, out of the blue decided, we met in a cafe one day, it was a blind date, and we decided to start a business. And what that speaks to, for me at least, is that a co-founder partnership should not be seen as complementary skill sets per se, because that's too narrow a band to identify, but it's complementary individuals who can understand each other's sentiments, behavioral patterns, and it's a bit like yin and yang. Some could be an extrovert, some could be an introvert, some is more technically, some people love working with people, and that complementary style, energy levels often attracts people. And that takes some years in the making to be able to discover that. So, but that's essentially it, Corina, that I think, these are different examples of what I like to draw out based on my observations.
And in your experience, Vijay, let's dive into, co-founders. What are some mistakes that you have seen that have been made when hiring a co-founder?
Yeah, so I think one of the some that comes to mind, number one is basically expectations from each other. And so, when you look at co-founders' expectations, are the co-founders in for the money? Are they in for the purpose? So if they're in for the purpose, it means that they are really genuinely are being pulled together because they want to solve a problem, and they're on a mission to solve that. And so those for me are missionary type founders. Founders that get together because it's opportunistic, because there is money to be made, or it's a marriage of convenience. Those relationships could work, but I bet if I were to analyze it, they tend to have a high percentage of breakups in the longer term, because expectations evolve, market conditions evolve, and because you came in on one set of preconditions, those preconditions may evolve 2 years, 3 years out, and therefore you get those tensions in the founder journey. So understanding where you're coming in from, being purpose-led versus commercially driven, or for the sake of convenience. Those are two lenses that you can look for how founders come together. The second issue is, irrespective of your level of friendship, relationship that you've established, it's always good to have a shareholders agreement in place in the eventuality of a misunderstanding or breakup. This is what we call a prenup agreement. And often founders don't do that because there's so much love and trusting between founders. They said, well, we don't need it. We know each other so well. But understand that time evolves 5 years, 10 years down the road, and you might get new co-founders, you might get expectation involved, someone gets married or have a kid. It puts pressure on the individual in terms of expectations financially and otherwise, and time in particular. And therefore, having those agreements, trashed out on paper becomes a set of constitution between 2 or 3 co-founders to understand. In the eventually this happens, we know what we need to do, what are the barriers, and so on. And the last piece is basically, you might discover that 2 or 3 co-founders might have different working styles. So some would love to work at peace, some, basically leave me alone for 10 hours. I'll just love coding. I don't want any distraction. Some would love to have that constant interaction every 1 hour to brainstorm and kick off ideas. This is just an example. Some people like to have a clear mandate to go away and execute the job and come back. Some people like to be working on an open, transparent book. Everyone has got their own characteristics. And so working styles often could be a source of tension. The last piece, I think, is be very clear what are the financial expectations, who's going to put in what, because when you're doing a startup, which is stages from 0 to 1, there's not going to be any revenue, there's not going to be any income. You're most likely ain't going to raise capital. And so you're going to put in your own resources, whether it's sweat equity or some financial contribution to the company. And that has to be very clearly spoken out upfront and have some really realistic timeframes to manage those conditions, because it can cause a lot of tension as the company kicks off.
Vijay, when you're looking through a Techstars application or even during the interview process, what stands out to you the most when you're evaluating a founding team?
So when I look at the founding team, I particularly have 2 or 3 really important points. Number one, are they working well as a team? So the team dynamics, there's clear roles and responsibilities, there's no overlapping duties, and each individual can answer questions specific to their domain knowledge, expertise, what value to bring to the table. Number 2, could they demonstrate their persistence and commitment to solving the problem? Often it's easy to form a team. It's easy to get on a dopamine high about the idea. And, let's say, for example, we're going to create an AI for a diagnostic tool for diabetes because someone in the family has gone through this. So let's go do this. But not doing enough research to find out how many other competitors out there has really worked on it. Or, for example, do you have the data to support that this particular tool and your go-to-market strategy is going to support that? So the insights into how you can solve it is really important. And I think the third piece is basically, why are you doing this? Are you doing this because do you think it's opportunistic? Are you driven by the purpose, as I spoke to you earlier? And if I find that founders really have, as a team, they're all in it because they are on a mission driven, they're more likely to be funded because that's got staying power in gelling the team, right? But if each and every individual have different motivation, some are more purpose driven, maybe the CEO is purpose driven, but the co-founder is more opportunistic. Hey, maybe I can get 30% equity in this company. I'm hoping to maybe exit in 5 years. I can do with a big handsome payout. You might find that that's going to be tension because of conflicting values and conflicting why. So the why is really important for the founding team. So I think the three things for me is dynamics, how they work together, persistent and commitment to solving the problem, and then the big why. Why, as individuals coming together, are they compatible? And for me, those are three things I will really look out for. And if there's a red flag in any of those areas, I would hesitate to potentially invest in these companies.
And in that same manner, is that how you assess a team's capability of being able to pivot and adapt?
Yes. So you're absolutely right. And I think the word coachability comes to mind, Corina. And so, in those are the layered characteristics I will put onto the team, that they have coachability, their willingness to open to feedback. See, one of the things that it's great at Techstars is because they get access to close to 100 mentors in that 12 weeks of working in any of the programs around the world. And the benefit of that is that you want to go in, you might be sure what you're trying to solve, but there's a lot of unknowns. There's an expression, you don't know what you don't know. And so if you're going in with blinkers, you're more likely to lose value in the process. But if you go in with an open mind, and often you get a feedback, it could hurt. The feedback is saying, not by one individual, but say several individuals, and you see a pattern. Hey, maybe your tech stack is not built robust enough to keep up with the scalability issue that you're solving in the marketplace. And therefore, you have to kind of recode everything and start from scratch. That could hurt for the CTO who's put in his heart and soul in building that tech stack. You might also get a feedback from the marketplace that, hey, I've been in the corporate C-level for decades, and I can tell you that no one's going to buy this B2B software because it's really hard to compete with the enterprise solution providers out there. So you're wasting your time. That too could be painful to hear because, your hypothesis is built on that. And so sometimes you have to regress because that's what the market is saying. And really you burn a lot of cash in the process the last 3 months, 6 months, and then you have to reset and start again. That ability to pivot comes from the ability to be coachable and willing to understand and listen. I would say that some founders are superb at doing that, but sadly not everyone. And so we are very conscious about the fact that if us as Techstars, we want to add value, it's not the capital, i.e. the check of $120,000 we're going to be investing. It's really the program and what the impact the program can produce through its mentor pool that we bring to the table. And if founders are not able or willing to absorb the learnings through the feedback, then it's a real shame that we therefore can't impact and change, impact the success, but neither can we add value to their success as well. So this is something we are very wary of, and we are very conscious about paying attention to their coachability.
Yeah, and actually a lot of managing directors, when we ask them about a founding team or like a founder, they often mention, the coachability aspect of a founder. So really good points. Christoph is asking, when it comes to CTOs, does the niche they have experience in matters? For example, let's say someone has worked their whole career in embedded tech, but now they are pitching a SaaS web app. Is that something that investors care about?
So yes and no. So let me give you the underlying, let's unpack this conversation, okay? So the first thing I want to know is that anything that you've done in the past and you've done it well, that accounts for something extraordinary. If you've done anything mediocre, that doesn't impress anyone. So the first point is that understand that in any pursuit of a skill set, and expertise that you develop, you've done extremely well. You could be an accomplished pianist for all I care, but coming into tech or maybe coming into designing UX experience or whatever it might be, it counts for something because you will have the ability to master skill or master a domain that I know you can do pretty well in other domains if you've done it for one. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing is, of course, if you have a relevant skill set, a relevant domain, a relevant market, then of course that adds even more points to your scorecard because your ability to pick up the pieces from the get-go is quick and fast. There's a shorter learning curve to adopt and adjust to this new domain. So I think these are 2 points I just want to unpack to make the difference because both are relevant and you can't say one without the other. And so it's not a simple binary decision.
And in those beginning stages, Vijay, how must co-founders split the equity? Is this based on time, investment, capital investment? Are there any red flags as combinations to those? What do you have to say about that?
Yes, so there is no hard and fast rule, but I'm going to give you an opinion. I want to qualify as an opinion, not a rule. An opinion on base what my experience talking to investors, talking to other managing directors, tend to lean into more than others. And that is, if you have, let's say, 3 co-founders, each having 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 seems pretty logical, given that no one's put in any equity in terms of cash. Everyone's doing equally on balance, a great amount of work or same amount of work. It sounds like a logical thing, but eventually, investors would like to have one lead founder. And the reason of having a lead founder is in the event there is a decision to be made, which could be a tough decision, we want the lead co-founder to be able to make that call if necessary to move the company forward, as opposed to having a stalemate where indecision arises. Indecision is crippling. It can be crippling for the company. And I've invested in companies in the past. Here, case in point, I know who I'm talking about, but I can't mention the name, that were kind of split in which direction the company should go in terms of fundraising or go in terms of go to market. Both, let's say, scenario A and B are equally viable options, but because they could not arrive at a consensus, the company decided not to take a decision, and that was crippling. And so the implied idea here, Corina, is that if one of the co-founders might have, say, 40%, and the other 2 co-founders have 30% each, will make investors a bit more comfortable in the eventuality that there is such a situation. So that's one point. The other point is, I think that you will have 2 types of founders. You have founders who basically come in as just sweat equity, but you might have one founder who might be putting some capital, and so that capital will reflect the equity split. So you see that on the cap table. The only caveat is that we do not want to have any of the co-founders having too minuscule a equity hole, because we want to make sure that on balance he's got skin in the game. At the very least, 15% on the cap table to reflect that he's a real co-founder, not a minority shareholder, which reflects more like an ESOP scheme where he's just given some equity to work for. So he's more of a hire with equity compensation as opposed to a co-founder which has 15% or more. The third scenario is that you might have one co-founder, a solo co-founder, started the company owning 100% of the company, but eventually gives way to co-opting a co-founder. For example, he might say, I'm not strong in technical, so I need to get a CTO. And he gives up 25%, 30% of the company to the CTO on a vesting table. So that could be maybe 3 to 4 years, where the co-founder then earns out his rightful share of the company. That scenario too is commonly seen, particularly when one co-founder joins the company at a later date than the original founder started. So those are three scenarios that I just want to throw out that you often see.
Are there any book recommendations for founders to learn about those early stages, hiring, or any resources that you might want to share?
I have just one book, Venture Deals by Brad Felt. Is a fantastic book, which was written 10 years ago, and it's circulated highly within the Techstars community. You can search it on Amazon, Venture Deals. It really talks from both lenses, the founder's perspective as well as the investor's perspective. Much of what I talked about today is in spirit, can be read about in that book.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those for that recommendation. Corey from the audience asks, are investors put off by part-time teams?
Yes. So generally speaking, I think a part-time team is not the asset that you can invest in. Basically, great help to move the company along. So I give you a scenario. There's a great company we invest at basically at day zero, and the founder in question had a track record of building companies before, and he says, "Look, this is the vision, this is the idea, this is the problem I'm going to solve, but I don't have a CTO with me, and I'll be looking to hire a CTO when I get a bit of traction. In the meantime, I'm going to outsource my tech development to a company I used to work with, and they've got a team of 6. They'll give me a special price for it, and they'll be my temporary team for the first 12 months till I raise the seed round, and then I'll have a CTO joining me." I've had dealt with that situation, and it's workable. Because sometimes founders may choose to defer the onboarding of a co-founder at a later stage. They're more on a stable footing. That's a choice that the founder has to make, not us. But investors are not going to be investing in the outsourced team or the temporary team for sure. They're still investing in that solo founder with the hope that they will also build a stronger founding team when they onboard the co-founder in due course. So that's something to keep in mind.
When you're evaluating a team, Vijay, and you hear about maybe a history of them, of like the CEO or one of the co-founders having to remove another co-founder from the team, does that become like a red flag? Is that something that you look at all?
So I'll be honest with you. I would say in my experience, that experience occurs 1 in 10 occasions. So we do our really level best to work hard to ask the questions, the team dynamics, the persistency, what's your why. But sometimes it does slip through the filters, put it this way. And even among the founders, they're so enamored with their colleagues. They say, "Look, no, that's not us. We'll make this happen." But 6 months, 18 months down the road, things change. The environment changes. And I often say that it's better split earlier than later, so you don't have the burden of carrying on a legacy, which makes it really difficult. Because investors are going to be quite shrewd and have a very keen eye to see that through. Often they may not give you the feedback, but they sense there is not a great dynamic. They'll give a pass when it comes to investing. So the CEO founder should really understand that what are the gaps or what are the weaknesses or shortcomings in the team early on. If it's really not working for the sake of the company, you have to make those calls much earlier in the day rather than kicking the can down the road, because it's going to hurt the company in so many ways. So an early exit would be the best solution. After, of course, trying all best efforts to kind of get the team working together.
Being in the startup ecosystem for a couple of years now, I often hear this saying or this phrase is fire fast and hire slow. Does that stand true? Is that something that founders should follow?
I think that maxim holds true both for hiring a co-founder as well as hiring a team. I think most of our co-founder, because like I said, the founding team becomes the asset of the company. And so you can't afford to make fundamental mistakes. Sometimes if you have a team of 25, for a junior position, you might say, okay, I'm not going to impose really high standards because we have to get the team up and running with the deadlines is crucial. It's a great hire on paper. Let's make the call. I get that. That's okay. But for a co-founder, no way. You really do not want to rush into that. You really want to know his bedside manners. You want to know his background, what ticks him, what frustrates him. Do you share certain hobbies together? All these are important pieces to build a relationship. It's like a marriage.
Mhm.
And so one has to take that level of depth of seriousness to onboard a co-founder.
So, in a pitch deck, what is the best order, the best way to talk about your team? As you're maybe attaching a personal story or how you built the team or like the team's expertise. Is there like a silver bullet for including that in a pitch deck?
So I've seen two versions of a pitch deck. All right. So the classic pitch deck is basically what's the problem in the market? What's the solution? How large is the addressable market? And then why we as a team are the best to execute this. And here's a team background. So in that sequence, typically that's a classic form. But then the other version of it is if I am a founder who has a very personal story, for example, I'm, let's say, a cancer survivor, and I had to go through this agonizing journey of the last 5 years. Then I realized that, healthcare doesn't provide this solution. And because of the frustrations I've gone through a near-death experience, I've now discovered that there's a better way to do it. So articulating the journey of the story from you living it through and then coming to the solution in that reverse order also can work, because you're basically saying that I lived through the problem and I get what the problem is. So it's a very powerful way to approach a pitch if you have that compelling story. So I said both would work. But at the end of the deck, fundamentally is that the storyteller and the team are two different things. If you decouple the two things, the team is the one that's going to execute. And so when people are looking at investing in the team, they're looking at the ability to execute. So when you do your slide for the team, you're essentially saying, these are the three individuals who come from different backgrounds, have this academic qualifications, this corporate experience, and they all have combined an all-star team. In addition to that, I think also what plays in influential posturing to the investor is who are your key mentors that you're attached to. They can actually influence that decision quite a bit. And I mean genuine advisors who are mentoring or coaching the companies. Typically, they're already angel investors and they're represented in the deck. That could be quite powerful because there's skin in the game by these advisors who are helping the founders. So I will double down on that and spend a bit more time on the team and talking about persistence, commitment to the problem, as well as why us and why now is the right team to invest in.
Would you say that the why now slide in a pitch deck is important to include?
Very much so, because, market is dynamic, and over a period of time, the ideas may have evolved. Ideas may have been around for maybe a century, but why now is this? For example, we recently looked at investing into a space tech company, which is really using 3D printing devices, but using materials from the moon. And so those materials can be actually printed into products like, for example, a cup or a device of sorts, and so on and so forth. But why now is because the cost of printing machines have dramatically come down. The cost of computing power has dramatically come down. And so the ability to produce materials or machines at lightweight, the use of micro robotics is more feasible today. So for all those reasons, for example, right, is the why now. But the idea of having that 3D printing or a manufacturing plant on the surface of the moon may have been envisaged 60 years ago, but it was not feasible because of the evolution of the industrial revolution, electronics, computing power, and lightweight materials. So all that confluence of factors is driving the why now. And you can articulate that in a really intelligent way, make it so compelling, that drives investors' more interest.
Awesome. I think we can do one more audience question and begin to wrap up. Elena asked, for a single founder, would you recommend focusing on fundraising or building customer base first? I don't feel that we can do both, and I need to quickly hire a team with the funds.
I love that question. And I want to say honestly that you got to, as an entrepreneur, you're going to be juggling 5 balls in the air at any given point in time. And often you're going to be dropping 1 or 2. The reality is that you can't just stick to 1 or 2 balls. Life is not that simple and easy. However, investors or money will chase great teams with evidence of great traction that they're chasing in the marketplace, right? So if you pause on the development of acquisition of customers, if you pause on the development of building a product, a prototype, getting a POC, you're just going to limit your ability to fundraise. In other words, don't put the horse before the cart. Have the development on product development, have the development on market development, have the development on sales on the forefront of your strategy, full throttle. It's much easier then to get investors coming in because the conversation is going to be a lot more, in your favor, as opposed to talking to investors in a vacuum. Well, this is my idea. This is my plan. This is what I hope to do. Only when I raise $1 million, then I'll start billing customers in revenue. Well, guess what? No investors are interested in that conversation whatsoever. Okay. So that's the challenge you need to do is full throttle, forefront, build your company, build customers. And with that evidence, capital will chase you, guaranteed. That's the way the marketplace works.
So would you say like founders, shouldn't portray or showcase in their pitch deck that they're solely relying on funds to be able to continue growing?
Yes, I would caution against that. I think it would irritate almost the daylights of some investors to say, if I have $1 million, then I will start doing X, Y, Z. I think what one has to demonstrate is that you're building an airplane once you're driven yourself off the cliff and saying that, look, I'm about 2/3 down, but I just need a bit more capital to kind of finish the engine. But I'm still, jumping off the cliff. That demonstrates a couple of things. Number one, you got the courage, you've got the vision, you got the confidence that you're going to build an airplane on the way down, and if you don't come in, I'm likely to get other investors to come in. That positioning is very powerful, as opposed to saying, "Well, I'm going to sit at the edge of the cliff. Let me build a beautiful aircraft, and then please join me in this journey." It's unlikely that you're going to get a lot of investors interested in that.
Wow, amazing. Thank you, Vijay, for this past hour of insights and knowledge. I want to remind everyone that if your question did not get answered during this session, you may always email us at startups@techstars.com, and my colleague Jessica will go ahead and leave that email in the chat. Vijay, is there something that we did not cover? Any last words? And also, do you want to go ahead and tell founders where to reach out to you?
Yes, thank you very much, firstly, for listening. Thank you, Corina, for asking those great questions. I know there's a lot of questions in the chat and the Q&A that we did not cover, but I hope it's been interesting. I just want to leave with one piece of advice that building a company, it's a journey, and it's 24/7. And so your ideas are constantly evolving. There's no such thing as regretting any mistakes. Please don't have any regrets, because one it's easy to see things in the rearview mirror and say, I wish I'd done that. Well, guess what? Me included, having built many companies in the past, have lived through a lot of mistakes. But the challenge is that how can you accelerate your growth, both personally and for your company, by surrounding yourself with some great mentors or advisors who can short circuit the learning growth quickly, so that you can actually make less of these mistakes. And so that's the only advice I would give, is that, the quicker you can surround yourself with like-minded individuals, whether it's peers, as founders, or as mentors who are willing to help you, or angels who's willing to invest with you, you will have a greater chance of succeeding than someone who has not. And one of the things that Techstars pride itself is giving you access to that network globally. Some amazing individuals who've been some great companies around the world. You can really tap into that as part of being a Techstars company. But I encourage you can do this on your own as well. So my only advice is surround yourself with some great mentors to help you build a company. With that being said, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you.
Amazing. To our audience that came here today to join us, thank you all so much for joining. And we hope to see you in our other events. I'll go ahead and leave also our Techstars events page so you can join us for our fundraising series, our pitch deck reviews, and everything else. Vijay, again, thank you so much for joining, and we hope to see you on the next one. See ya.